to pass Measure M, a half-cent sales tax in LA County that will help build 40 major highway and transit projects over the next 40 years and change the face of Los Angeles County. Measure M is the largest modern public works program in North America and includes new rail and bus rapid transit lines, as well as a highway, active transportation, state of good repair, and local transportation projects for LA County's 88 cities. Phil had a distinguished career in the military, retiring as a disabled veteran with 24 years of service in the United States Army. He held the rank of Command Sergeant Major, the highest position a non-commissioned officer could achieve. Originally from the South Side of Chicago, he holds a BA in Business Administration from Columbia College and an MA in Management from Webster University. Please welcome Phil Washington. And I'll say this before I tell him to take it away. Phil, we thank you for making this happen today. And we know that you were in your board meeting and you were able to get here just in the nick of time. So take it away, Phil.
Well, thank you so much, Freddie. Really appreciate participating in this distinguished panel discussion. And let me just say, Freddie, your leadership and vision as the chairman of COMTO is just so appreciated by all of us around the country. You've done so much for COMTO and the membership around the country, and I'm just very, very happy to be able to know you and to be your friend. So thank you for your leadership. Let me introduce our panel. This is really a distinguished group, and the historic nature of a panel discussion like this is pretty incredible, actually. To have four gentlemen who are leading their respective state DOTs is very, very historic. I don't know if this has ever happened before, to be honest with you, to have these four African-American gentlemen distinguished in their own right and leading their state DOTs. Let me introduce them first. I'd first like to introduce someone who's a good friend of mine as well, and that's Toks Omishakin. Toks, he came to California in 2019 to take the helm at Caltrans, where he continues to work tirelessly to infuse equity into every segment of the transportation network. It's no easy feat at Caltrans, we know that. I work closely with him being in California as well. Nearly 22,000 employees. It's the largest transportation network in the nation. He is simultaneously completing his Ph.D. in engineering management. I worked together with him just recently on the Biden-Harris transition team, the agency review team. So we're thrilled to welcome Toks Omishakin. Toks, you want to make a couple of comments, just intro.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. I'm not sure how we're doing this, if we're just gonna go one by one and make some quick intro comments.
Yes.
Okay, good. Just quickly, Phil, good to see you. I haven't seen you in a couple of weeks now from my work. I just want to thank you for your leadership. You essentially, Phil, were my boss for 4 months as you helped lead an immense team of 20 really smart people from across the country on helping the Biden-Harris team get prepared, Secretary Buttigieg get prepared to lead the country in transportation. So thank you for your service and your work. You deserve a lot of credit for helping the country get to where it is with the team that's in place now. And also thanks to COMTO, thanks to Freddie and the entire team there for pulling this discussion together. Like you said, Phil, this is historic. One of the members of our band is missing, the fifth member of the band, Paul Echegba. He's spending time with family, but just to be a part of something like this, this discussion is pretty cool experience for me. I'm honored to to be with my counterparts from the 3 other states. So thanks a lot, Phil. Appreciate it. Back to you.
Great. Thank you, Toks. Dr. Shawn Wilson, in 2018, Dr. Wilson attended the COMTO conference in Florida, and I remember him being there in the panel that I believe was done at the COMTO conference there. Prior to 2018, Dr. Wilson was the only African-American Secretary of Transportation in the entire country. He focused on developing a bench of future leaders within his agency and across the country. He and all of us are proud of his record of inclusion, his commitment to developing leaders and leaving a footprint of color in the transportation industry that has led to excellence. And I can remember during the transition, we interviewed Shawn, myself and Toks on a call. And so I really appreciate you participating in that, Dr. Wilson. So let me have a few comments from you, sir.
Well, thank you, Phil. And it's always a pleasure to be with our colleagues from the other states. And more importantly with you, because I am so grateful. We just finished an AASHTO Washington briefing where we had perhaps the most diverse, the most talented, the most experienced, the most substantive modal administrators, along with Secretary Pete. And you, I know, had a large hand in putting the team together and being a part of that effort. And so we all are going to be beneficiaries, as Toks said, of your hard work and mentorship and wisdom in this space. You know, I'm excited just to be here and witness and be a part of this. This is something that you said does not happen, has never happened very often. And I'll never forget, just as a little anecdotal piece, we have these Washington briefings. And at the Washington briefing, probably last year, was the first time that we had all 5 African-American secretaries together at that hotel. And I've got a picture in my office today of all of us sitting there, kind of like the Rat Pack or the band. And it was amazing, not in terms of what we felt and how we interacted, but it was amazing the snapshots and the cameras and the people that perhaps didn't look like us that said, stop, let me take a picture of this. Mm-hmm. And it was really an eye-catching thing. And it was a foretell of what was to come in terms of talking about inclusion and equity in this transportation bubble. And so I am just so blessed and excited to have made the acquaintance of you and this organization, as well as these other young secretaries and the future Dr. Toks. So I'm excited to be a part of this group and look forward to a very healthy discussion.
Great. Thank you so much, Shawn. Omar Osman was appointed Transportation Secretary by Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker in 2019. His role as secretary reflects 3 decades of experience in my home state of Illinois at the Illinois Department of Transportation in both engineering and management. Under his leadership at IDOT, he continues to champion diversity. He remains an advocate for eliminating barriers and increasing access to IDOT partnerships with disadvantaged business enterprises and minority and female-owned businesses. So let's hear from Mr. Omar Osman. Sir.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Phil. Thank you for your service, and thank you, Eddie. I truly do appreciate this opportunity and appreciate COMTO. I get to know COMTO a couple of years ago. I think you mentioned Florida, and I was down there with that panel with Dr. Wilson and Paul. And I get involved in COMTO, and I'm glad I did. A little bit late in my career, but I became an advocate for COMTO. It's a premier organization. From my vantage point, Chicago does have a very active chapter. So I get involved with them whenever I get a chance. Dr. Wilson and Toks, both of them have said it best. It is a rare opportunity that you will see a 5 CEOs of major department of an African American descent. It's an opportunity for us, five of us rather, to leave a legacy behind us, and to set a better perhaps foundation for future leadership that is that's really diverse, and it's a challenge. And that challenge was pretty much apparent, when Dr. Wilson was just the only CEO in the entire nation who was heading a DOT. Now it's got five of us, and we hope that five would grow into a 10, into a 15, and this just becomes facts of life. And we're not celebrating it because that is what it's supposed to be. So thank you, and thank you for the invite again, and back to you, Phil.
Thank you so much, Omar. Dr. Jack Marchbanks, he's the director of the Ohio Department of Transportation. He was appointed by Ohio Governor Mike DeWine in January 2019. In his role, he has responsibility for the overall management of the department's 5,000 employees and the development of a $3.3 billion budget. He provided strategic direction to the statewide administrators of the agency's finance, human resources, information technology, legal, and communications divisions, as well as the opportunity, diversity, and inclusion programs. We're very, very happy to have Dr. Jack Marchbanks. Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Washington. Again, I join Omer Osman in thanking you for your service. As someone who comes from a military family, I know how hard it was for you to rise to the rank you did. So thank you for your service and congratulations. Like my peers have noted, our responsibility is to make sure that we're not the peak when it comes to people of color being in these positions. We want to make sure that we drop a ladder so others can climb. One thing that I am really excited about is COMTO. When I was in academia a few years ago and came back to the Ohio Department of Transportation in 2016, Phil, Crockett here at Columbus COMTO was one of the first persons to reach out to me. And he basically informed me that we need to get more African Americans interested in working in this field. So with Phil, with Mr. Crockett's support, we started a CDL program where we're basically training women and people of color in the fundamental duties they have to perform to be highway technicians here in Ohio. So I applaud COMTO, everything they've done nationally, and it's a privilege to be among these gentlemen. And congratulations again to Toks. As someone who was working at an engineering firm while studying for my Ph.D., I know how hard it is.
Absolutely.
It's rough.
Absolutely. He ought to be studying right now. Thank you all so much. And a couple of you mentioned Paul in Michigan as the fifth. I just talked to Paul probably about a week ago. I talk to him often, and I'm going to find out for myself why he's not on this call. So we'll see. I want to have just an informal conversation, as if we are sitting around a table, which would be very plausible, right? The six of us sitting around the table. And I want to start first with Shawn. You were the lone state DOT executive director just a few years ago. In a southern state, by the way. A southern red state, by the way. A southern red state. What was it like the first few years as the only African-American secretary in a southern red state?
It's a good question, Phil, and I think about that daily when I walk into this building. I have to think about what it must have been like for William T. Coleman when he served as our first African-American U.S. DOT secretary. I'm forced to think about others who have been the first. And, God puts us in places that we are prepared for and can be used for. And I had the privilege of being in that position for a couple of years and not being lonely. While I was alone in this regard, I wasn't lonely. And so there were relationships that I was able to build, much of with the folks that are on this panel with us today, that made it easy, because while they may not have been secretary or commissioner or director, they were people that were peers and were capable of doing the work that they're doing today. And so it was very difficult. It was pressured, but it was still a journey. And you know, without getting into a whole lot of detail, it was building what we know we are capable of as a community. I found it somewhat disappointing at times. I can remember when AASHTO would get together, my predecessor was a female, and at the time we had 6 female secretaries. That was a rarity, and we had more than that now, but that was a rarity. And so they would get together and go to dinner every year at these AASHTO meetings. They would have their own little help group, their support group. I never had that opportunity, but I will always remember what it was like when there was a second and when there was a third, and it made being the only one very, very rewarding, having to see others come along. And then even at the state level, it was difficult because in our agency, other folks recognize that. And I had a hard time reconciling, do I make that an issue, or do I have to rise above this issue of diversity and inclusion, because that one lone voice isn't going to be heard as much as 5 voices or 7 voices when it came to the issues of diversity. So I found myself actually pulling back on those issues at times because of my fear of it slowing the progress or being challenged and not having a sounding board that was supportive. So it was a difficult time, but I relish every minute of it, because I wouldn't be where I am today if I weren't that. And someone had to do that and be the only one. And I wasn't the first only African-American secretary in the country. I'm sure I won't be the last, unfortunately, because of the way these positions are filled, but it sure is a good feeling to have others around the table with you now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I want to ask the other 3 about this idea of diversity, equity, inclusion, and ask you what your organizations are doing to build this into the fiber of your organization, and not just solely it being an HR responsibility. How are you building that diversity, equity, inclusion into the fiber of the organization? Let me start with Mr. Toks, Omishakin, and then we'll go to Omer, and then to Jack.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks for that question. And by the way, before I answer it, I want to make sure I mention one of our partners, Phil, in this work, the former CEO of COMTO, Bradley Mims, who we worked with, very closely for several weeks, is now the Deputy Administrator of FAA. So shout out to Brad for his work, not only on the transition team, but also leading COMTO for the few years that he did. But to your question, I think it's one of the most important questions in front of us, Phil. I really believe so, because we have an opportunity in front of us. We're at a very pivotal moment in the history of our leadership, in the opportunity that we have to run our organizations, and we can't leave behind, like my cohorts here said, we can't leave behind a vacuum of not really embedding in place things that will leave a lasting tenure for the people who are going to come behind us and for the people we serve today. I can't stand when we just give lip service to this issue. We talk about equity a lot. It's become the buzzword, so to speak. We just talk about, equity and equity, but we've got to put some things in place. And so at Caltrans, one of the things that we've done from the onset is we put out an equity statement and said, we believe that we've had some negative impacts based on the transportation system we've built. We've had some negative impacts on minority communities, and in particular African-American communities over the years. And that, moving forward, we want to do differently. That we're going to be more understanding, we're going to be more sensitive to those impacts and try to provide some uplift. But not just a statement on itself, we set aside a framework and said, we're going to have 4 Ps that we focus on every single day. And our work is going to be done through these 4 Ps. It's people, it's projects, partnerships, and planet. So, and we don't have the time for me to break down each one of these 4 Ps, but everyone listening, you should, if you get a chance, go look up Caltrans's equity statement. And you will see under each one of these, the fact that we've laid out how we're going to focus on these 4 Ps, and we're making ourselves accountable by attaching metrics to each one of those 4 Ps. So not just talking about it, but actually having a framework to guide us throughout it. But also as well, I think very important is resources. So we've created an office, to your point, Phil, we've created an office called CORE at Caltrans, CORE, C-O-R-E, Caltrans Office of Race and Equity, that has a leadership that is going to be working on this issue on a daily basis. That's their job, a full team. But I think the key point in the question that you asked about it not just being HR is the fact that part of that group's responsibility is to help us internally and externally make sure that this is a lens that we're doing our work through every day, that it's the aperture that we do our work through, and not just an office that's been created on the side. So I know California is a little different, you know, that we can go a little bit further than some states and immediately create an office. I doubt Secretary Wilson can just, jump into a place like that in a state like his. But I think we have an opportunity here to create that a template that other states can follow.
Right, wonderful. Omar.
Likewise, and I appreciate what Toks just said. I do have the equity statement that Toks just talked about. It is something to look into. It is a great statement the way you have it laid out, especially the 4 Ps. I actually gave it to my own staff to look at, because at Illinois DOT, we do have our own equity statement, and we have it set up somewhat differently from Caltrans, but it's basically the same concept. One thing we are really concentrating on at the Illinois Department of Transportation is the diversity of our own employees. Look, and someone mentioned that Phil, you are from South Side of Chicago. The state of Illinois is almost 41-42% minority. Right. That's the entire population of 12.5. So our metric, one of our main metrics is how can you make your own employee population, the diversity within your population, match the population of the state of Illinois. And there are several initiatives you are undertaking, obviously, on the recruitment side, on the hiring side, specifically on the technical side. Now, we have been, somewhat lucky in our diversity when it comes to engineers and engineer technicians and technical managers. However, our own highway maintainers, which is about 40% of our internal employees are highway maintainers. We have been challenged in diversifying our highway maintenance, basically set of employees. We have established several new initiatives so we could at least crack the wall on the highway maintainer side. We are revisiting our entire recruitment approach, especially since the pandemic. We have typically we have concentrated on historically Black colleges when it comes to the technical side, and we do have our own kind of recruitment office that does that for us. We have been lucky so far. One challenge we have is even, it's not just to hire, a diverse group, is how you retain them, how you pull them through the rank, specifically when they get to the point of, a 10, 15 year tenure with the department. That's almost the point where you start getting into the managerial position and leadership position. We reinvigorating, IDOT have been historically very famous for a good training, a good managerial training program that at a couple of steps that we have kind of getting away from lately, but we are reinvigorating that in a purposeful way, where even the employees you are training are diverse on purpose, because that's the leadership that I would like to leave behind me when I'm done with the Illinois DOT. You cannot, if you don't have a good bench to select from, you cannot ask for people to rise to the leadership level. One other area that has been a weakness for us, and we are trying very hard to correct, is how can you get a diverse panel of interviewers, not the interviewees, of interviewers. It has been an issue for us. It led a lot of our own employees to question some of the prior selection we have made in the past of who gets to be promoted and where. So that is a major initiative of mine that I want people who are coming in to interview for any position, especially coming through the rank, to know that each and every one of them is equally considered. So that's one other initiative we are purposefully reinvigorating and changing. So that's on the internal employee diversity side. Of course, the bigger issue is Illinois. Under the leadership of Governor Pritzker, we had one of the largest, if not the largest, capital bill program in our history. And with that, obviously, comes in the issue of equity, and how can you, in a fair and equitable way, make sure that the entire population of the state of Illinois is participating in delivering the largest capital bill we have seen in the history of IDA. I know that is a much larger conversation, and perhaps we could come back to this point later. Back to you, Phil.
Good, thank you. And let's go to Jack, and then after Jack, I'm gonna go rapid fire on all of y'all.
Okay.
So Jack, please.
Well, thank you, Phil. What we are doing in Ohio is going from compliance to commitment. My predecessor, Jerry Ray, formed the Office of Opportunity, Diversity, and Inclusion back in 2015. And that was meant to address, frankly, shortcomings that the Ohio Department of Transportation had historically with recruiting women and minorities, but mostly in the DBE, MBE programs. What we are doing in terms of making sure that we have diversity and inclusion embraced by our internal workforce is to make sure that what gets measured gets done. Every executive, from frontline managers to assistant directors to myself, we measure ourselves in regards to what did we do quarterly to increase outreach to potential employees. And I applaud Omer. A key aspect of that is that interviewer panel. That interviewer panel is key to you getting the right people in your organizations and making sure that women and people of color are not screened out. So one thing that I have done in regards to making sure that this gets into our DNA is to let people know that equity just basically means fairness. Everybody understands fair, and we have an instinctive thing in us as human beings when we know something is unfair. So my pledge to all of my employees is I'm going to do the best I can with what I have, where I am right now, and they should do the same. So we are looking at making our department look more like Ohio. We are like California in many ways, in that we have several metropolitan areas and then we have rural areas. So we use the Department of Labor to give people an achievable goal. We're not going to ask somebody in Appalachian Marietta County to go out and expect them to go out and hire a lot of Latinos and African Americans. But we know you can do that in Columbus. We know you can do that in Cleveland. We know you can do that in Cincinnati, and we know you can hire more Latinos in Toledo. So we're crosswalking Department of Labor statistics with outreach to getting more women and minorities people of color into the Department of Transportation, because that will make us a better organization. A diverse organization has been proven time and time again to be a better organization because of the quality of decisions made.
That's fantastic. Fantastic, Jack. I want to ask you all, and I know that this is probably a tough question, but can each one of you name one of the challenges that you faced along your career path, and how did you overcome it? And again, this is going to be rapid fire, so I'm going to give y'all about 5 seconds to think about this, because we've all had a lot of challenges, but I'm asking you for probably the toughest one and how you overcame. And I'm going to start with Secretary Wilson, and then go to Jack, and then go to Omar and Toks.
So Phil, that means they get a longer time to think about what they want to say. I will give you one that's really hard, because this is one that I struggle with as a leader. You know, particularly being an African American, we oftentimes get asked to do things by other African Americans that it's not necessarily illegal, but outside of the protocol or the process that we have to follow to be professional, competent, and compliant. And so the hardest part is conveying sometimes that I just can't always hook you up with something, if you will, and that it's not that I'm not trying to help you. It's not that I don't want you to be successful, but I got to build a framework and a model that will sustain you. And if you align yourself too much to one individual who did you a favor, you're not going to be successful when Shawn leaves this building. And so that's the hardest challenge for me, is sometimes working with a minority community on things that they would like to have happen. That's not always easy and practical in these positions.
It's incredible. Hook a brother up. Let's go to Jack.
All right. In my regard, my greatest challenge was at the beginning of my career as a planner. We were putting in cable medium barrier very early on, when it was really a new thing. And because I'm a planner and not a civil engineer, I faced credibility challenges. So how I overcame it is that I had my mentor, who is a civil engineer and a professional surveyor, kind of vouch for the idea that I brought forward. So I used my network of support to gain credibility. And of course, we all know that cable medium barrier has been a lifesaver all across the United States, particularly in flat states like Illinois. So that's one of the things that was my greatest challenge in my career so far.
Wonderful. Omar.
Well, my story is almost opposite of Jack's. Some 15 years ago, I think now, I was part of the group in Central Illinois that was overseeing a $500 million project right through Peoria, Illinois. Peoria is a small town, I'd say around 120,000 population, right in Central Illinois. It was a $500 million project, and it was brought to us by yours truly, Secretary LaHood, who is from Peoria, Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this $500 million project was on I-74 through downtown Peoria and downtown East Peoria across the Illinois River. I'm coming through the rank at the time as a civil engineer. All throughout my career, I didn't know anything other than, how to drive a pile, how to construct a bridge, how to put a pavement down, how to resurface, basically the civil engineering, design, and construction work. But all of a sudden, this larger project comes in, and the leader of the Peoria district at the time, who has since retired, who's basically my mentor, kind of took me off to the side and asked me to do something different on the project, different from the day-to-day, different. He wanted me to think outside of the white line, so to speak. Forget about the technical side, forget about the bridge and pile, driving a pile or constructing a deck and all that. He wanted me to manage the project, meaning get involved in the diversity issue, get involved in the community issue, get involved in the scheduling issue, in the overall cost issue, and get away from the day-to-day technical side of the issue. That was probably one of the most difficult time I had initially, because there's this, kind of inherent resistance from the civil engineer. You don't want to get away from your comfort zone. But without him prodding me, without him pushing me into bigger issue, and without him, asking me to look at not only the technical side, but what does that project means for the entire community, for the investment, for the economic side, for Peoria, for Caterpillar, for the hospitals in this area. And that was, to me, that was transformational. To me, that just get me out of that technical zone into something that is helpful to me today when I'm managing a $33 billion program. I will never forget that. I'll never forget the difficult time, but I will never forget how rewarding it has been to me so far. So back to you.
Great. Mr. Toks.
Phil,
Tough
you said
challenge.
you said rapid fire. Good luck with that rapid fire with this group. So quickly, I was reminded of this challenge this week, last week during an interview, and it's that speaking up sometimes as I was coming up through my career was a challenge for me. I think the way some people put it is finding your voice. It was the way that it was put to me, and I think either culturally or just because of my personality, I found it hard to step up and to speak up. I grew up in a culture in Nigeria, and Omer, this may be similar for him, from Sudan, where people of authority or people that are older than you, you're not supposed to speak up when they speak up. You're supposed to sit back and listen. So if you were with your uncle or aunt or your parents and they were in the room, you don't say a word. You better sit there and listen.
And you look down. You don't even look at them, right?
Absolutely, Omar. Absolutely. You actually, absolutely, you look down when people are talking to you. And so when I came to America and ended up in a professional setting and people would be talking in a room and I would have my head down, like my bosses, they'd be looking like me like, what was wrong with him? Like he's losing his mind or something? And so it took me a while to learn how to look up. First of all, look up. You're in the military. You were in the military, Phil. You know, sergeants talk to you or somebody talk. You can't be, all the time looking at. You gotta look him in the eye. So it took me a while to learn how to do that, and not only look up like Omer is saying, physically look up, but also to speak up. And I want to tell anybody who's out there listening, who may be challenged with this, spend the time. And that's what I did. I spent the time to understand the fact that physically and mentally, vocally, that I have an opportunity to speak up. So it took some training. It took some time. Sometimes I feel like I go overboard now and overly speak up. Now I got a staff of several, thousands. I have to dial it back sometimes and be quiet in the room as the leader and not always be vocal. But thanks to the guys for giving me some time to think about this.
That's a good one.
No, I tell you that those are all great answers. I wanna double back just a little bit on that question. Leadership, as a friend of mine at Harvard says, is dangerous, right? It is dangerous because the idea, at least in my mind, is to survive long enough to do great things. A friend of mine at Harvard always says that leadership is the art of disappointing people at a rate that they can absorb. And so this idea of leadership, especially going back to what Toks is saying, as a Black man, and because you could easily be labeled an angry Black man, you know what I'm saying? And so the question is, what is your personal leadership philosophy around this issue of not coming off as an angry Black man, but being and understanding that you have to lead, of course, but understanding that you got to survive long enough in order to make those great changes that you need to make. So I'm going to start with Jack and then go to Shawn and then go to Toks and then go to Omer.
Thank you, Phil. My personal leadership style is to lead with trust, to engender trust. It's something I learned from, the playbook of Colin Powell. If people trust you, they'll follow you. And how do you engender trust? You engender trust by doing what you say you're going to do. And in my case, I have done that, and I've been blessed and fortunate to be able to follow through on commitments I have made. And my approach to avoiding the angry black man or arrogant black man moniker is to be just folks. I am the son of a working class father, somebody who worked for the railroad and worked for, a factory in southwestern Ohio, Dayton. So I can, because of my background, I can identify with everyone who is a restored citizen just coming out of prison and working for us in our apprentice program to someone who went to Harvard, because that's my span of life. It's about people. It's about basically respecting people, leading with respect, but first of all, making sure that your team trusts you.
That's heavy. That's great. Mr. Shawn, you got to come off mute.
Yeah, I was answering some questions and didn't want to be heard typing. I get angry about the angry black man. My way of dealing with it is to be an example of competence in my profession. My way of dealing with it is to be an example of doing what I'm asking others to do and not anything more. So when I go out to a district, I'll get under a bridge with my bridge crew. I'll pick up trash with the maintenance crew. And so I use that to de-weaponize the issue of he's an angry guy. I'm just doing my job representing people and what's in their best interest, whether those people are my department or our citizens. And you can only overcome that anger with competence and realize that sometimes you just are going to upset some people, but you do what's right and that's going to prevail. I also think it's important to invest in others becoming competent in their discipline. So we have made it a point to invest in not just people of color getting other degrees, skill sets, and trainings, but all of our people to be trained as best we can. I'd rather have someone working for me trained and let them leave than have them stay and never have a better skill set. Toks is very familiar with that from his years at Tennessee, and that's just so powerful.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so Phil, excellent question. I think it's a completely unfair moniker that sometimes gets placed on us. It's frustrating. When I think about this issue, I think about President Obama sometimes and what he had to go through for so many years. As cool and calm and collective as he was, that still got dropped on his head very often. I remember when Trayvon Martin was killed in Florida, and he had a press conference and he talked about how Trayvon could have been, or was essentially the same age as his daughters. And that when he was young, he sees himself as Trayvon. And he had some comments like that, and the media just lit him up. Like, how dare you talk about yourself? You're the president. How can you talk about yourself in that light of somebody who just got killed? Like, stop talking like that. I was so frustrated by that experience and that exchange, but I know it's something that is hard for us to shake. But what I try to do on a daily basis is focus on the why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I try to inspire, I try to motivate people, I try to walk the talk, and not just like my counterparts have said, not just be telling you to do something that I wouldn't do. So those are the things that I try to do, but I know it's not easy. It's not easy to shake. And I think some people probably still express that, but I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it, to be honest with you, though. I'll be pretty frank. I don't dwell in that possible labeling. I really don't. I try to live the why. I'm doing what I'm doing. Focus on inspiring and motivating people. But we have to understand at the end of the day, all of us are still human beings. We are entitled to get frustrated and to get angry. I mean, we can't be robots because somebody expects us to be different and to be happy-go-lucky all the time. No, these are hard jobs that we're doing. We're spending a lot of hours. These are not 8-hour jobs, Phil.
Right.
You lead a big agency there. You know what I'm talking about. And so there are times where we're going to get that way, and I feel free to be able to do that. So, but a very important question, Phil. Thank you.
Absolutely. Omar.
I'm not sure there's a whole lot left for me to say. I think my colleagues have articulated some of the issues very well. The angry black man notion sometimes creeps in. It does. I listen. I come through the rank. I came through the rank 31 years with the department, and I could safely say, because I have been throughout the state of Illinois, not just in one location, I could safely say I know majority of my employees at a personal level. That made it easy for me because wherever I have been, there is a group of engineer or group of technicians that I have worked with or worked for at some point in my career. That made it easy for me. IDOT is very complex. Leadership is not easy at any level at the department because of the complexity of the department. That's for sure. What I do, and I value all the way through, all throughout my career, I value the concept of teamwork in a true sense. And I guess that's one of the major training the department undertook at the time. So that was instilled in my head. Teamwork. It is about the project. It's not about you. So when I was coming through the department, sometimes you deal with different personalities, and one of the personality traits that I have a hard time dealing with is somebody who's consumed with their ego. If you are totally ego driven, I think you lost me at a personal level. I do recognize a little bit of ego might be a positive thing because that's if you are a leader and you don't have that a little bit of ego, you're not driven. That makes you a little bit successful. But to be totally consumed by ego, as a person, I have a really rough time dealing with that, whether it's from within the department or without the department, as you deal with other people. But at some point in time, you have to put all that aside. I think Toks said it best. This is a 24/7 job. You cannot take work home. Your work issues home with you. Sometimes you have to have that. A couple of hours for family. You have to rejuvenate yourself, but you have to recognize very well that this is a 24/7 endeavor. It's tough. It's not easy. Um, but that's basically my answer. The best answer I could give you to that question.
Great. That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Those are great answers. I want to focus on the importance of having a mentor. I can remember my first mentor as a youngster on the south side of Chicago, growing up in a single mother home with 5 sisters. I'm an only son, and my first mentor was the church janitor. He had maybe a 5th grade education, but he just, would just focus on me and just give me little tidbits when I saw him on Sundays, and that carried me the rest of the week, actually. Um, Toks, talk about maybe how important it is to have a mentor, either your first mentor or a mentor in your field now. And I know the other gentleman, you all mentor each other too on the highway side, but talk about how important it is to have a mentor. And then I'm going to ask then Omar to follow you, Shawn to follow Omar, and Jack to follow Shawn.
Phil, you're hitting home runs with these questions. I hope people are getting a chance to soak up some of the discussion. Being a mentor and having a mentor are probably two of the most important things you can do in your career. Setting aside time to be one and finding multiple mentors is key. So not only finding a mentor in the field that you're in, like we're in transportation, but finding mentors that are outside the space. Like Phil, the example you gave, I love that example of the fact that you found a person, I'm assuming it was a man, who you grew up in a single parent home, who could be sort of that second parent for you. And you, the thing I like about what you just said is he was a janitor, is what you said. You didn't say he was a banker or CEO. Right? So you recognize something in him and he recognized something in you that you found a bond and an attachment there. And I think, and I'm guilty of this. I look to the people who, have done things that I want to achieve. That's where my mind always goes, but that's not necessarily always the case. I'm going to give a shout out to a guy who wasn't a mentor, but was a guide to me, at least I would say. It was a security guard in the building I used to work in Tennessee. Wow. African-American man, Mr. Wade. He's there's no way in the world he'll be listening to this right now, but when you walk in the building, you always saw Mr. Wade. And Mr. Wade would always give me some pound and give me a shout out and say, man, because at the time I was the first African-American to get to the level of being deputy commissioner in Tennessee. And so he recognized that, and he would always lift me up. So not just look to the people that have done all these, reached the highest ranks and levels of their field, but just people who are have a good spirit, have a good heart, good intentions that you can listen to. There are people like that many of us talk to. I know Shawn does. Secretary Rodney Slater, and I talked to Secretary Fox. The people who have sort of come before us at a major level that I reach out to and talk to pretty often whenever I need some guidance and help. And I have mentors, outside of that space, people that I went to church with who I know are good men and women that I go and say, man, I'm struggling. I need some help. But to your point as well, I take the time to mentor others. I can't even count right now how many people that I spend time with on weekends or weekdays and just give them 30 minutes and just say, hey, lay out the issue. Let me hear what's going on and try to lend a word of advice and counsel.
Fantastic. Who's next? Y'all remember the order? Come on.
Omer next.
Omar.
What? Is that right?
It's a lightning rod,
That's
Omar.
right.
It's a lightning rod.
Lightning rod.
Hurry up.
Lightning round.
All right. So let's talk about. I think early on I was talking about this one particular leader in Peoria who kind of took me out of the technical realm and put me in the managerial, or pushed me into the managerial realm. Well, the background on this person is, his name is Joe Crow. He has retired. He used to be a district engineer. Well, Joe Crow's dad used to work for the Department of Transportation in the 60s and 70s. And Joe Crow's dad is one of those leaders who kind of thought about equal employment opportunities and whatnot before it became a federal law articulated in the Civil Rights Bill and all that stuff. So he initiated some sort of an office, a central office, to talk about equal employment opportunities and giving everybody a chance. What I wanted to say is he became my mentor, but what a lot of people don't recognize, if you don't know Joe Crow is as white as it gets. A white person with a white family, but he had the foresight and he was a leader by nature. But he has the foresight and he had the experience being in different districts to look beyond and look beyond the today's issue and look for what is going to how things would maybe look like tomorrow, next day, next month, next year. And that was part of him kind of, taking interest in me. He saw something in me perhaps that I didn't see. And he thought that might make me a better leader. That's why he pushed me into the managerial side. I'm going to get back to even to what Tok was saying about the cultural difference and how the people from different culture react in a different way. This Joe Crow called me to his office one day when I was thinking about interviewing for a higher level position. This is some 15, 20 years ago. And when he called me up to, when the boss calls you up to the office, you immediately think about what you might have done wrong. Am I going to get fired and all that stuff? So I'm sweating it, and I climb up to the 9th floor, and he wanted to sit down and talk to me about how I should be interviewing, what I should be saying on the next interview. And one thing he actually researched, and this is perhaps when internet was not very prevalent as it is today, is, Omer, you come from a different culture. I have noticed that you, your culturally have a hard time saying the word I. We are not taught to talk about our abilities. We are not taught to pat ourselves in the back, so to speak. But that is not the way it is here. When you are in an interview, of course you have to talk about your ability. Of course you have to talk about your accomplishment. It is a hard thing it was a hard thing for me to do, especially growing up until high school age in Africa. It was hard for me to give that up, but slowly he managed to redirect my approach of how I should be looking at things. But the reason I'm telling this lengthy story is, for one, you don't know who is going to be your mentor. It doesn't necessarily have to be somebody who looks like you. And by the same design, it doesn't necessarily have to be, you don't have to be a mentor for somebody who looks like you. There are always leaders at all levels. And if you give it the time, like Toks says, and you take an interest in 5 people, not 1, not 2, but maybe 5, maybe 10, then you are doing something that is positive and that is going to make somebody's future brighter. That's all what it is.
Okay, thank you,
Thank you.
Omar. Excellent example of rapid fire.
Let me follow the rules, brother Phil, and tell you and demonstrate rapid fire. So my mentor was Dr. Rafael Barranco, a dentist, graduate of Meharry. He taught me a lot about public service. Brother Martin, the late Brother Martin, married 55 years, taught me a lot about being a husband and a father. And Governor Kathleen Blanco, who taught me a lot about applying public service in that space. She also taught me the importance of having a dismentor, finding people who are doing things that you don't want to do. They're mentoring you by the behavior that you don't necessarily agree or subscribe to. So learn from those folks, and then recognize that there's a difference between mentoring, advocating, and sponsoring. And that is the next level of leadership. So some of the folks that I'll mention are the Joshuas, the Algies, my son, folks that I will mentor and sponsor. So don't just concentrate on those that are gone before you, but those that will follow you, and learn from those that are doing the behaviors that you don't agree with.
Excellent. Jack.
Omar, that's rapid fire, brother.
You got it.
All right. I'm going to be rapid fire like my fellow doctorate holder, Mr. Wilson, Dr. Wilson. My first
doctors.
My first mentor, I'm thankful to say, was my father. My father was smart enough to be a mechanical engineer. I was blessed and fortunate to have a great father. But because of where he was born and when he was born, he never became a mechanical engineer, but he convinced me that I was exceptional. Second, my industrial arts instructor, David L. Henderson, who kicked my behind and basically told me, you need to be tough. So he instilled grit in me. He said, it's not just enough to be talented, you have to be resolute. And then my intellectual mentor, Dr. Alex Willingham, down at Clark Atlanta University from
Absolutely, that's wonderful. I know a pastor told me not long ago. He said, "Keep the door open and the ladder down." And I think that is just a fantastic sort of visual as we look to one, be mentored and mentor others.
Yes.
We've got maybe 5 minutes before we go to Q&A, and there's a number of questions in the Q&A box that we'll get to. But I want to just quickly, work-life balance. Work-life balance. I mean, all of you, I think Toks said it first, it's a 24/7 job. I mean, it is. You get the phone call any time of night or whatever. What's the work-life balance for you all? And I'm going to start with Jack and go to Shawn, and then to Omer, and then to Toks.
Thanks, Phil. This is an area where we all put ourselves at risk in terms of our loved ones. You know, we have to take time for our family because this job, as Toks pointed out, will take all your time. So you just have to step away. We have put teams in place. We don't have to be there making all the decisions all the time. So I have to catch myself to say, I'm going to hand off to my chief of staff. I'm going to hand off to my chief engineer, and I'm going to spend time with my family. So I make sure that I take care of myself physically. You know, even in the pandemic, I'll find out. I'm actually doing steps at our headquarters when nobody's around. I'll just go up and down the stairs because our building is empty during the pandemic, so I get to do that. But we have to make sure that we keep time for our family and for ourselves. Those mental breaks. I'm a movie culture fan, so to relax my mind, I'll go watch something that relaxes me. I just watched Judas and the Black Messiah. That didn't really relax me because that's a powerful movie, but it's a great movie and something that harked back to my times when I was a high schooler in Midwest, and I actually am old enough to remember when Fred Hampton was killed. But murdered is the word. But we have to make sure that we pull back and let our team help us so we can have some time to refresh ourselves so we can be leaders.
That's powerful. That's powerful. Mr. Shawn.
Thank you, Jack. I will tell you, work-life balance is different in the first term than it is in the second term. Because I needed to prove myself. I needed to go above and beyond and do some things. And I'm at a point now, having survived COVID almost a year ago next week, to learn to go home, enjoy a glass of wine, and just watch the grandkids, to go and sit and enjoy my patio. And those things are the mental reliefs and relaxations that you need. And Jack mentioned it. You got to have people around you because there was so much stuff that we had to deal with when I walked in the door as secretary. And there will be even more stuff that will be left when I walk out the door as secretary. If I get rolled out as secretary, then it's really a bad situation. So I find time and make that time. It's hard to do. It's never enough, whether it's hunting, fishing, painting, music, reading, do something, because you can't do all the great things we just talked about if you continue to allow yourself to be rotted from the inside out. And so I get that from my church, I get that from my family, and I get that from just enjoying people. And then there's an opportunity to do that with the folks that are on the screen. So when we go to AASHTO, when we go to meetings, we have an opportunity to pull ourselves on the side and rejuvenate and communicate and have a jovial, cordial relationship. So work-life balance is absolutely essential. Don't expect it to be perfect when you start a new job, but know at that point in time when it's time to transition.
That's fantastic. Nice starting a job and then being seasoned, more seasoned in the job impacts the work-life balance. That's profound.
So I can let these others work hard, Phil, because I got 4.5, 5 years under myself.
Exactly. Omer.
All right. Well, Phil, for me, perhaps 2019 into 2020 prior to the pandemic. And this is just because of the capital bill we had that I talked about early. The pressure was on. It was difficult because it's implementation time. It's setting the groundwork of how you're going to go through the multi-year program, 6-year multi-year program. That time frame was very difficult, very exhausting. And I live in central Illinois, and my headquarters is an hour and a half away. So I'm 3 hours, almost 3 hours on the road every morning. I'm an early morning person, and an hour and a half coming back to Peoria. So 3 hours of my day is gone just driving. But sometimes those are the best 3 hours you could have, because there's a lot of people on IDOT that you could talk to and you could exchange views. You're already working while you're in the car. Yet this year, and it's not because of the pandemic, I think it got a little bit better for me from the vantage point that, working from home, it gave you a little bit of flexibility. I have young kids. I have one who's a freshman, one in high school, one in junior high, so you need time for them. And it's just a joy to sit around and maybe do some tutoring, or maybe watch a movie together over the weekend. If you haven't, a lot of people know this about me. I'm a history junkie. I get into Civil War. I get into World War II stuff. I get into documentaries. So that's some of kind of like off to the side. That's what relaxes me in a sense. But that family time, even half an hour, just sitting there with your kids, seeing what is going on through their mind, trying to resolve their issues, having dinner together. It is crucial. It's really, really important that if you don't get to do that, at some point in time, it's just going to get to you. And it's going to be so impossible that you can't function anymore. So,
excellent. Okay. And Toks, and then we're going to go to some Q&A from the audience.
Yeah, real quickly on this, a very important issue. If we're going to be successful, we have to try to find that balance. The day I was sworn in here, the Kincaid fire started in California that burned 80,000 acres. The day I was sworn in, and I immediately have to try to figure out how our team was going to be responding to that. Through the pandemic, over 4 million acres have burned here in California, Phil, as you know, of land. And this is on top of everything else going on around the world that, a lot of people are not experiencing. But I try to keep in mind the reason why I'm doing this. First, it's of service to the people of the state. The governor has given me a great opportunity to do this. And then, but most important to me, more than anything else, are my crew at the house. I call them the J's, Julie, Jeremiah, and Joy. That's my nucleus. That's why I'm pushing myself as far as I am. But I can't push myself so far to the extent that I miss out so much time spent with them. Jeremiah and Joy are 14 and 12. And so in a few years, they're going to be talking about going to college. And so I try to keep that in mind. But I try to find an outlet as well. And for me, fitness is the main thing, because school is wearing me out. I don't know how these other two docs, how they did it, but school is, I'm getting gray hair and everything thinking about it just now. But find an outlet for sure. And working out is one of those things for me.
Perfect. All right, I'm going to the audience questions. Now, the way I want to play this is, we got a lot of questions. I'm going to ask one question. I'm going to ask two of you to answer, then I'll go to another question and the other two. So the first question I'll ask, how do the challenges differ from someone coming from private, public, or academia background? So challenges differ, how do they differ coming from these specific backgrounds? Does that make sense? Private, public, or academia? So I want to ask this question of Shawn and Jack, and we'll go with Shawn first.
Interesting question, because they all offer different skill sets. And I think the challenge that you will find for those different disciplines is going to be around performance. It's going to be around promotions. It's going to be around the standards of how you deliver and do your job. And so you may have one that is much more thoughtful and philosophically based. You have another one that's more about ready, fire, aim to get the job done. And you may have another that may strike that balance. And so a good executive, a good agency will figure out how to tap each of those resources and those skill sets that are unique to those disciplines and apply in that workspace. And so for me, I think those are some really interesting ways to say it's hard for a private sector person to come in the government because he's going to be limited in resources. You know, something as simple as in the public, you can't necessarily go stay at the Ritz-Carlton on business and expect that to be an acceptable practice, when in the private sector, you had to go there to get business and do the work. And so finding that balance and using each other as sounding boards, I think, is going to be hugely helpful in helping you be successful in public service or in the private sector once you transition. Because I can imagine when I leave this opportunity, having been in public all my life, going private is going to be an adjustment. And I think that's just the reality.
Absolutely. Jack.
Yes, let me add to what Dr. Wilson just said. Going from private to a government position such as this, it's the actual transparency. You do not have the kind of privacy you have in the private sector. So that is a key thing that people don't understand when they move there. So you need to be aware that there are lots of rules and regulations, and almost everything you do is public. On top of that, private sector challenges is a regulatory environment. When you come in from the private sector into the public sector, you're going to face far more regulatory overlook. Public, you know, from the academic area, you're looking at institutions that reward scholarship, that reward deliberation, that reward research. In the public sector, coming into jobs like this, you have to be action oriented. You have to not just be a person of thought, you have to be a person of action. And again, if you're in the public sector and you want to move up, you have to make sure that you understand the structure of your own organization and what are the paths upward. You know, look around and say, well, how do these people get to where they are? And you can basically backtrace those career ladders from those people you're emulating, and you want to ascend in the public sector to a higher public sector job. You do that by doing your homework and figuring out how these people got to do that, and then you emulate them.
Great, great. Okay, gentlemen, I'm going to transition to Gatwary, who is going to take over the Q&A. So I was a nice guy with the questions. She's really going to hit you hard some of these questions. So please.
Thank you, gentlemen. So our first question comes from Betty Jackson. Can each of you share your program models or support to elevate women of color into positions in the C-suite?
A good question.
Well,
Where you want us to start?
I responded in the box and said that we had to be intentional and that we have some limitations because of my 4,200 people. I only have 12 to 15 that are unclassified, and about 8 of those are appointed. And so I do have an opportunity to influence some of those appointments with my governor. We are very close. We have our first female and first African-American multimodal commissioner. My executive council is an African-American female, and we've hired other females. And I also responded to a question about we might even have to begin to look at diversifying the job description because the pool that we have may not be as large as we would like. And so if the pool is not large enough, you have to expand the pool, which might mean you have to expand the job description and the disciplines you're looking for to implement certain career paths.
I'll jump in next. We cultivate opportunities for women at the Ohio Department of Transportation. One of the things that we look at is assigning someone a mentor. And we also are very fortunate that we have a governor who has made diversity in his cabinet prominent. We have a female chief of staff. As Shawn said, you have to be intentional. You have to tell people, wow, wouldn't it be great to have a woman to have this job, all things being equal. And then what we've done in this case is we've hired, we have more women division deputies. We have 12 division deputies here in the Ohio Department, 12 regions. And we have the largest number of women leading as division deputy directors. You have to be very intentional. You have to basically go out and want to do it.
And I'm gonna jump in here, and I absolutely agree with what Jack just have mentioned. listen, when our new governor, when he came in 2019, he intentionally wanted to set himself apart at the one who's got the most diverse cabinet secretaries in the history of the state. He did that. Out of the 33 agencies, this is almost 60% are led by female, 40% led by minorities. It's a huge accomplishment. So I took the cues from him. I am 5,200 employees at the Illinois Department of Transportation. About 117 or 18 of them are appointed. That you would have a little bit of a leeway on deciding who should be installed or who should be promoted to this position. The rest of them are through a routine exam process that everybody have to interview for. Having said that, I could tell you one thing. I try to be the most diverse leadership team in the history department. Likewise, taking a cue from my governor. So my chief of staff is an African-American female. My chief operating officer is an African-American female. My director of legislative affairs is a female Hispanic. Out of five of my regional engineer, the one who handled the largest district in Chicago is a male Hispanic. I do have an African-American who handled one of the mid-sized district. My deputy chief of staff is female. So when you try, and those are absolute quality. You know, you think you're doing it intentionally, but what you're gonna find out is why didn't you think about this way earlier? Because those are quality people. They bring a lot more to the table than what some people might think, and I'm very grateful for their leadership and for what they bring into the department, for sure.
Yeah, real quickly, I agree with what the gentlemen have said. I think the intentionality is important. Building a team with diverse thoughts and diverse backgrounds is probably one of the most important things you can do. And we've done it here at Caltrans as well. In my tenure, almost a year and a half now, 46% of the career executives, 46% that I've hired are women. So nearly half. I mean, we have to be intentional about it, and not in a sense of just, giving a woman the opportunity, but qualified. I mean,
Yes.
these are women of high caliber, quality, and background. Not just to have the label, yeah, we're appointed woman, but these women are delivering in many cases. So excited about the direction that we're headed in building that very broad outlook on a team. You're on mute for that? Okay, there you go.
Sorry. Thank you. So our next question is from Mario Alexander, and our moderator and panelists can also chime in to answer this question. How do you avoid organizations not just hiring people of color to check the boxes, but to ensure they are hired throughout the organization, in addition to having a seat and, most importantly, a voice at the table?
Phil, you've been grilling us, so you got to go first. You've been grilling us this whole time.
Well, I thanks for the question. I would what I do is make sure these things are embedded in their personnel evaluations. That is the only way I believe that you're going to get folks' attention, is that if you tie these things to their money and you put it in their performance evaluations. And so, not just their money, but also to impress upon them that this is the organizational culture that you want. And so these are the expectations that you are embedding in the organization. And I think you can institutionalize these things by the performance evaluations. And let me just say that there's many ways that we can check for equity in our organizations. I mean, every year I ask for the salary information for all of my managers, and invariably I see that I have to make some sort of internal equity adjustment for some group of people. And it's usually It's not intentional. It's that folks have maybe fallen behind. Maybe it's a group, women or Black, African-American males or whatever. So these things we can do in between the hirings and all of that. And so I think it's embedding that culture in the organization.
I agree with what Phil shared. You have to make it part of management's, evaluation system. Our 12 regional deputy directors, our central office, division deputies all have as part of their annual employee evaluation metric, how are you doing in terms of diversifying your team? The other thing that we have to do, and we have to do a better job of it here at the Ohio Department of Transportation, is once you have women and minorities in your organization, don't just leave them there, because they'll be stranded, and you'll end up looking up and you'll be signing a separation notice. So we just hired this person 12 months ago. You have to have a strong onboarding. And that's something I am pushing with my HR department, that we need to strengthen our onboarding and mentoring. Just having a partner, an advocate, as Dr. Wilson talked about, it doesn't have to be an official mentor. It can just be someone to help someone adjust to this very rare culture of state DOTs. We have, as state DOTs, a very rare culture, and a lot of people have a hard time adapting to it. So we have to make sure that we onboard well in order to keep women and minorities in our organizations.
All right, so our next question, can all the DOT secretaries and directors address the traditional battle of DBE/MBA participation, considering race-based versus race-neutral goals?
I'll start. That's a big one. One thing that we're facing here in the state of Ohio is generating that community of DBEs. The DBE bar is hard. We have, let's face it, we have people we have Latino organizations, Latino businesses who don't want to do business with the Ohio Department of Transportation because the federal guidelines, the federal strictures are hard. So what we are looking at doing is reaching out to all communities, Somali, Hispanic, African American, of course, disabled vets. You have to basically pull them in and basically sell your program to them as being worth the trouble, because once you get them in, they will find out that it is good business. So we are expanding our DBE, MBE outreach here in the state of Ohio. We have a federal program and a state program called MBE, and we always exceed our state goal for MBE, but when it comes to federal DBE, it's a tougher hill to climb, but we are working on it.
I would agree with Jack, and I would say it's also an issue in terms of our ability to dig deeper than just meeting your federally mandated goals,
Right.
but break that down by the different groups that make up the DBE program. This is something I'm hopeful that the leadership at USDOT will work toward, is to take the policy decisions and framework that we have at the federal level that's in our programs. And we talked about this at ASHTO today, that there is no DBE as a part of FRA, for example, but that we need to look at the program and really complete the policy, because I think it was designed to introduce folks into this business space, but not necessarily to sustain them. And there are things like caps and penalties and restrictions. From a policy standpoint, I think that can be managed at the federal level through reauthorization and other policies that are going to be promulgated by USDOT. That is a very difficult thing to do in all 50 states, because some of our states, like my state, have rules and regulations around how it spends its money. I rely on the federal framework to make sure that I have something. Other than that, I'm limited by statute in what we could do, which is not necessarily the most effective policy.
Yeah, just quickly, I think we need some to what Shawn was just saying. I think we need some adjustments in the federal law and federal policy in this place to see if we can get more African American businesses, DBEs in general, on board. We're not where I think we should be in California at Caltrans on this issue. We actually are falling short on some of our DBE goals when it comes to this particular area. And we're working on a disparity study right now to understand what the percentages and numbers really need to be. But African Americans, for example, left almost nearly 1% of business opportunity, if you will, on the table in this last cycle in the state of California, to the tune of about $12 to $13 million of business opportunity that wasn't used. So we've got a lot of work here, and I recently hired a new civil rights office director, and this is a big part of his job and responsibility is tied to this, to see how we can get the numbers going in the right direction. But this is a whole nother topic that could last hours that we could talk through. A good question.
Gentlemen, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Secretary Osman says he has to leave for another engagement. So at this point, we're going to wrap up the questions where that'll be the last question. And if I could have our board chair, Mr. Fuller, come up and give the closing remarks.
Hey, but Tara, can I make one quick statement for his closing remarks? Let's not forget about the private sector and the folks that are on that side of this equation. When I think of folks that we get to work with, like Eric over at Centos and Josh over here at HNTB or wherever he may be, or not HNTB, at a bonding firm, for example. That's where he's at Stiefel. Those are things that you've got to think about in terms of how we work across the aisle for competent services and work. And so we concentrated on this side of the equation. I think it's important to think about the other side of the equation as well.
Thank you, Secretary Wilson. And I'll hand it over to Board Chair Fuller.
Well, gentlemen, I want to say thank you. It's been a pleasure and an honor to have the opportunity to listen to all of you. Phil, thank you for moderating, and to Director Omishakin, Secretary Wilson, Director Marchbanks, and Secretary Osman. Today was outstanding. We learned that leadership is disappointing people at a rate that they can absorb it. We also learned that we should stay away from the hookup. Mentors don't come packaged like you think they do. They come from all around you. And if you want to relax, don't watch Judas and the Black Messiah. I do want to say that Paul Ajabar was invited, the director from Michigan, but he's practicing work-life balance and spending time with his family right now. And also I want to acknowledge Secretary Osman who recently received the WTS Ray LaHood Award in Illinois. So I wanted to make that shout out to him. I also want to say thanks to the COMTO national staff. In fact, I had absolutely nothing to do with this, but say, okay, we're hosting all these guys. Okay, we're hosting these guys, but the staff has worked really diligently to pull leaders together like yourselves. And for those that were on the call and wonder where all the ladies were, about 2 weeks ago, we did the Her Story panel where we had directors from the city of San Antonio and the city of Houston. And look forward to next month during Women's History Month, when there will be another panel of women leaders. So we haven't forgotten about the sisters. We just need to make sure we get some sisters in some of these DOT leadership roles as a secretary or a director. So with that said, thank you. Have a great day. I'm gonna give it back to Getwiri for some last minute comments. And it's been a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, gentlemen. And before we go, I just want to give you all a heads up about some upcoming COMTO programs. On March 9th, we will have a webinar, tax advice for small businesses. So if you're a small business looking for some tax advice, please join us on March 9th. And on March 11th, we have our Women's History Month program, Women Leaders in Transportation, Breaking Barriers and Making Lasting Change. That will be moderated by Carmen Garcia, who's one of our national board members. It will include India Birdsong from the Greater Cleveland RTA, Inez Evans from Indigo, Aurora Jackson from Lane Transit District, Deborah Johnson from RTD, and Stephanie Wiggins from Metrolink. So we're looking forward to another exciting event. And then on March 25th, we have our COMTO 50 Historical Perspectives. As you know, last month we had our part 1. This is part 2. It'll be moderated by Carolyn Flowers. It will feature our panelists, Dr. Beverly Scott, Will Scott, and Jackie Davison. And then on April 14th, Emerging Leaders will have its work-life balance during COVID-19 webinar. And before we go, we're asking all our COMTO members and supporters to help celebrate COMTO's 50th anniversary by supporting our 50 for 50 campaign, where you donate $50 for 50 years of moving the nation. So with your $50 donation, you will also get a COMTO 50 face mask. And finally, if you're looking for any more information on COMTO, please visit comptonational.org. That's where you can find our events calendar, information about our 50 for 50 campaign, and also about membership. So please, if you're not a COMTO member, as you see, you get great information through webinars such as this that we put on. A lot of our speakers have been involved at COMTO. They can attest to the power of COMTO and its importance in your career and your personal journey. So thank you very much. And with that, I'll say good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank
and a
you.
privilege.
Bye.
Enjoyed it. Appreciate it.
All right, wonderful.